Well, we can hear the 7 o'clock clang of the gates, which is good. It tells us what time the prison is shutting. But Councillor Inkster is on his way, so if you don't mind, we'll give him another couple of minutes. And yeah, we'll watch it and see if Council, because he is on his way and he was in Vancouver today at a solid waste workshop. So. Okay, good evening and welcome to the council meeting for Wednesday, November 1st, 2017. It's now 7:03 p.m. and we'll call this meeting to order. And as usual at the beginning, also remind councillors of any conflict of interest that may arise from the agenda package or issues we discussed, that they act appropriately, declare that conflict of interest and recuse themselves. And we have an agenda that was circulated with motion to receive and adopt, Councillor Wright and Councillor Shanks. Any additions or deletions? Nothing from staff, nothing from council, no late business. All those in favor of adoption? Thank you. And we'll move then to the first item, which is actually World Town Planning Day. As Councillor Shanks points out, the agenda says World Planning Day. We will not be planning the world today. Though we might be as effective as planning our town. Whereas World Town Planning Day is an international day celebrating the accomplishments of planners and their contributions to their communities. On November 8th, planners in more than 30 countries participate in annual World Town Planning Day activities, a practice that began in 1949. And whereas World Town Planning Day highlights the aims, objectives, and progress of urban and regional planning around the globe, and whereas World Town Planning Day highlights the valuable contributions sound planning has made to the quality of global human settlements and their environment, now therefore I, Bruce Milne, do hereby proclaim that November 8th, 2017 shall be known as World Town Planning Day in the district of Sechelt. And moving on to item 5, minutes of the 3 p.m. regular council meeting. First, a motion to receive and adopt. Councillor Wright, Councillor Seegers seconding. All those in favor? That's carried. And our minutes of the 7 p.m. regular council meeting of October 18th. First, a motion to receive. Thanks, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. Any errors or omissions? Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. On page 9, 10.1, it indicates that Councillors Shanks and Wright are involved with the Sunshine Coast Drag Racing Association. I believe that's the Coasters Car Club. But I may be incorrect in that. Yes.
Their respective involvement with the Coasters Car Club, but the first part is the potential appearance.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. I would just make a note that resolution 5.2 could probably have been worded more clearly. We've got amended to clarify twice. I think it could say that the minutes of the 7 p.m. regular council meeting of October 4th, 2017 be amended to clarify that Mayor Milne did not attend the Planning and Community Development Committee meeting as noted, or something. Better than as amended and as amended for the third time. Minor. And the other one, I actually would like this one, is on resolution 9.1. Could we add "and Deputy Mayor" after the word councillor and before Ellis Lutz, so that Councillor and Deputy Mayor Ellis Lutz be appointed as his alternate? And that's because structurally it was very much in my mind that it would be the mayor and deputy mayor on that particular appointment. Councillor Lutz.
I believe on page 8, recommendation number 4 should show that it was carried.
Yeah, we have a procedural thing there where we make a recommendation that a number of recommendations be received and or looked at, and then some we pull out. So when we pull it out, should it show as a different sequence, or what? Corporate Officer Joanne Frank.
Thank you, Your Worship. I know it looks a little confusing, but if you go to the bottom of page 7, this is actually all one resolution, where it says that the following recommendations from the finance minutes of October 11th all be endorsed. And so there you've got recommendation 3 from those minutes, and 4 and 6, and at the end it's carried. So it's like one big resolution that's extracting out the recommendations for endorsement.
But when we take one of those out, like usually we say the following be endorsed, and they're all non-contested, right? So it would be 3, 6, 8, and 9.
So
but if we pull one out for discussion, and it has some discussion, would it come at a different? Have we done this before? Is this standard practice? Because it didn't appear to be. People saw it for the first time.
Yes, Your Worship, it is standard practice. However, the scenario you've just described could happen on another time. According to our notes, it didn't happen this time. But if you have a situation where council votes separately, so you take one recommendation out to consider it separately, and then you could have a separate vote, move, second, and carried just for that. But in this case, the minutes as a whole were voted on at one time. Those recommendations were endorsed all at once.
Then how did Councillor Seegers manage to oppose a single part of a multi-structure?
It was in the minutes that way, and Councillor Seegers asked that it be recorded in the council minutes. It was in the committee minutes that way.
So this is a reflection of the committee minutes?
Yes, again,
So
bottom of
not
page.
a reflection of the council minutes?
Both.
That makes sense.
Both.
It can't be both.
Yes, because the following recommendations from the Finance Committee were brought forward for Council's consideration and endorsed, and Councillor Seegers asked that her vote in opposition, as reflected in the committee minutes, be reflected in the Council minutes. Am I managing to just...
I understand what you're trying to do. I don't believe it's procedurally possible to vote for 5 resolutions and then oppose one in the middle of it. That's why we pull them out. And if you vote for, I understand, but I do understand if that's a reflection of the actual financial committee minutes that we then endorsed, including the opposition. So we'll leave them, but we'll watch what we do as we go forward.
I guess based on Council's procedure bylaw, what it says is that votes in opposition shall be recorded if the council requests it, so we didn't maybe split hairs as much, or maybe I should have asked for further clarification, but I just took it at that.
Or I should have, because I didn't when we were chairing it. Okay, any other queries on these minutes in terms of errors and omissions? All those in favor of adoption? Thank you, that's carried. And then business arising. Any business arising from the minutes? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to committee meetings and update regarding the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan. First, a motion to receive. Thank you, Councillor Shanks, Councillor Seegers. All those in favor? That's carried, and I'll turn to Angela Lettman, our municipal planner, to begin, and we'll, yes.
Mayor and Council, I have a short presentation to give you a bit more of an overview of what's the progress of the plan to date. Oh, okay. Went too fast, Connie. I just clicked once and, okay, let me go back here.
That's because it had a picture of house sound, and we were all
That's
trying
right.
to figure out why.
To review councils and mayor, what the intention is, an integrated community sustainability plan is a long-term plan developed in consultation with community members that provides direction for the community to realize sustainability objectives for the environmental, social, cultural, and economic dimensions of its identity. In terms of the ICSP, we also look for a number of sustainable elements such as long-term thinking, broad in scope, integration, collaboration, implementation, and monitoring. To date, the plan is looking to have 4 pillars: culture, economy, environment, and social. In the current sustainability plan, I just want to note that culture is mixed in with social. And we wanted this time, because of the strong interest in the community, to pull that apart and make them as 4 pillars. Key plan focus areas are sustainability, environment, social, arts and culture, economic development, governance, transportation and infrastructure, and land and community development. Oh. I'm not sure what happened. Are you able to bring it back, Connie? Okay, is that the next slide? Yes, it is. Okay, so the plan is in 6 phases, of which we're coming to the close of phase number 2, which is to create a sustainable vision. So in the last month and a half, we've done a significant amount of community consultation, and we're moving into the phase 3, which is to assess the current situation. The consultants will be working in that area for the most part. The advisory committee role was defined in the terms of reference and includes bringing forward a lot of feedback and input into the process, the vision, the objectives, and the directives. And you'll see in a few moments, they've started to identify the areas of main focus, and they'll be providing feedback on the draft plan and assist in presenting the plan to council and the community, we hope, at an open house. And perhaps in the future also assist with implementing the plan after it's finalized and adopted. So to date, we have a fairly large committee made up of 18, I believe, or 19 representatives of the community, ranging from First Nations to Chatlick High School students to representation from all of the neighborhood associations, and as well as some of the Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Business Association. And so there's a significant amount of people around the table. And we've started this is the type of work that they have done in the first few meetings, was identify priorities and in the certain areas. The advisory committee has had 4 meetings, of which 2 have been attended by the consultants. And the advisory committee discussion has been at times intensive in terms of there's a lot of information to go over, and you'll see in the next few slides. And we also had assigned homework to try to input into the sustainability goals and objectives. This is a typical table of which there are 24 pages, of which we've asked the individuals to help fill them out, since the discussion at the table was a round table discussion and we sometimes got a little bogged down. The homework table topics are on affordable housing, accommodating growth and density, attracting and retaining residents, accessibility, community design and small village atmosphere, more parkland, building neighborhoods physically and socially, sustainable and green economic growth, improving transportation, including public transportation, non-vehicle and ferries, employment, healthy local businesses, promoting downtown, childcare, which was a surprising one for me, perhaps due to my age, but I didn't realize the dire need of childcare on the Sunshine Coast for the younger parents. Zero waste, healthy environment, food security, climate change adaptation, as well as climate change mitigation, energy, adequate education opportunities for our youth, water security, preparedness for environmental changes, for emergencies, recreation opportunities, access to healthcare, a title called Community Togetherness, where we talk about inclusiveness and intergenerational neighborhoods, as well as the community as a whole, reconciliation with the First Nations, especially utilizing some of the social and cultural opportunities, safety, emergency preparedness, and personal safety. And then moving on, so those were quite a significant tables that are being, a lot of information is being generated. There was a pop-up event at the Oktoberfest, the street festival. It rained significant amount in the morning, but in the afternoon it got sunny. We had an info table that was manned by district staff, and there was a roaming consultants from Dillon who went out into the public and talked to the public about what was happening with the sustainability, encouraging people to take the survey. We've had 4 focus group meetings. Now, these focus group meetings were beyond the scope of the consultant. Staff felt that they were very important to have more one-on-one focus within the 4 pillars. And at those engagement sessions, we talked about the context of the plan, what it was, the background in that specific area on policy and bylaw review. And then we did a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats exercises, and we garnered over 160 comments. So I think it was a worthwhile sessions to have. And these are a couple of photographs from those sessions. We also have a web page, which I've taken a photograph here, and at the top of the web page on the links section, there is a link to our survey. So I encourage everyone to take the survey. It's a kind of rating. It doesn't take much more than 10 minutes. So if everyone in the public can go on and do that, that would be fantastic. Oh, there it goes again. Okay, try it. Ongoing and next steps. We have the online survey. We have advisory committee meetings. The next meeting is on Wednesday, November 8th at 3:30. It's open to the public. At that meeting, we'll be giving everyone probably an update on the progress where we're at. The consultants will not be there. The plan is for staff, myself, to give a presentation on the Whistler Center for Sustainability's analysis tool for development applications. It's quite an intensive document, so we want to bring the committee up to speed on it and to see whether they want to include it in the sustainability plan. Is it something that the district wants to use on a more frequent basis? Following that, there will be, as part of Dillon's plan, a workshop with Dillon Consulting and the managers, the management staff, to talk about some of the measurements that could be used and to talk about objectives and goals. There will be also a public open house led by Dillon Consulting in Phase 5, looking at the draft plan, presenting it to the community as a whole, and we hope to advertise that very well. Then there'll be a council presentation by Dillon at the very end, hopefully in terms of adoption of the final plan. I don't know what's going on here. There's supposed to be one more slide, or, well, maybe I'll go back here to just here to show we're at, again, I've put in this slide where the public open house is going to fall within phase 5, which will be the next very large public event. And then in March, we hope to be completed with the project. And if there's any questions, I would be happy to answer those.
Thank you very much. I'll first look to Council. Councillor Mueller.
Yes, thank you. In, what page is it here? Page 20 of our agenda. One of the deliverables on that page, the top one, is a background review summary memo. Is that something that we're expecting in the future? Is this the memo, or I'm just curious when that's
I didn't include it in the package, but I could have. They've developed a large list of all of the documents that they're using as background material. So we do have that. I could bring it forward to the next planning committee if you would like to see it there.
Okay, so this is just a collection of materials that they're using.
They're using in the review as much as possible.
Right, and there's a memo attached to it, so there's some type of a analysis or opinion from the consultants on that?
There's, I believe, there should be, you're right, there should be a report about that. I haven't seen an actual report yet, but I will bring that up with them in terms of deliverables. They have created the list. It's a significant list. It's, I think, 2.5 pages long of all the documents, including the regional districts we envision plan as part of the background documents.
Okay, great. I just wanted to provide a comment on the work so far. I'm very excited, of course, to see what the outcome of this community sustainability plan is. I know that some people out in the community have been a little bit maybe confused as to what the real thrust of it is. They think it's like the sustainability vision for Sechelt and some of the other ones, and I know that there's a lot more to it. When I look at this plan, I see anybody who lived in BC through the 80s in a small resource town knows what it's like to go through major disruptive events that actually get to the core of your very community's sustainability. And for us to be able to identify those and make some movements ahead of time, it's going to be extremely valuable. And I really encourage the community to get involved in this.
Thank you. It's a good point. Yes, we did go through a lot in the 80s and 90s. Councillor Inkster?
So as we go through this plan, and I mean, many of the pieces that are in this have been done a number of years ago. So what I would wonder is, after all the community input and the final step being, will it be presented to council in a sense of at a meeting like this, or will we have a number of, or that one meeting that we do every couple of months, the committee of the whole meeting where we have a 1 o'clock start and talk about it? Because I mean, there should be an opportunity, and there most likely would be an opportunity for council, I hope, to have a fairly thorough discussion of quite an extensive community consulted plan.
Well, we'll be involved in the major public engagement meetings, and then we'll be able to see what's coming. When it does come forward, if it looks like it requires a full discussion, such as a committee of the whole would be, then certainly that's a good idea, and councillors can do that. And at some point at the end of the day, it will come to a meeting like this as something for council to formally adopt or not, in the sense of making it an official plan of the community that guides our policies. The whole point is to make it embedded in our policy structure once we know what it is. Any other questions or clarifications? I have two. I had a little trouble figuring out what they meant by gap analysis, and they use it several times. And I'm wondering if they're using it in different ways, but they use it in page 18 and under meeting number 2, exploring the current reality, undertake a gap analysis. Then they use it again on page 19, where they talk about identifying key initiatives and processes, and we'll also identify any gaps in data. And they use it once more, carry out a gap analysis. And I was confused just because of where it came, what gaps they were looking at. So on page 18, they're structure, explore the current reality, look at success, how do we achieve, that's standard strategic planning. That's exactly what you do. But normally, you figure out where you're going, you figure out where you are, and then you look for the gap between where you're going and where you are. And in this one, they've got the gaps before they know where they're going. So I was curious if they were referring to something else, or
If I may, Mayor and Council, I think that what they're trying to say is that there are most likely gaps in some of our policies that we have currently, and that they're trying to identify those through our background documents and through consultation with the committees and with the focus groups. So we did have, there's very little about childcare in any of our policies, that's become a fairly significant social issue. So those are the things to try to look at. How do we elaborate on those? I think the gap analysis was on what was missing in the background documents.
in the background documents, but the background documents they need will be those that help us reach our vision of sustainability. And if we don't know that childcare is already in our vision of sustainability, we won't know if there's a gap or not. So they seem to be, I'm just watching what they're doing as consultants and trying to follow that process. The other question I had, I understand there was a meeting a week or 2 weeks ago that needed to be canceled for personal reasons. And just from a structural point of view, would that have, and we understand why that happened, and that's normal and acceptable, would that have been different if we'd had a permanent chair that had a different role in the committee, that if one person couldn't make the meeting, another person could have carried it forward? Or is there something we could have done structurally to the organization and the process that would have allowed that to carry on?
If I may,
Yep.
Mayor and Council, in this case, it was that the content was going to be presented by myself, and I believe I'm the only one who's familiar on staff at this point with the template to look at the development analysis. So a meeting could have gone on with a different agenda, but we didn't have any specific agenda items to discuss.
So that's good. So content specific, and it wasn't structural. It wasn't anything we could have done to, I don't want from an organizational point of view for, sometimes we are indispensable because of content, but not because of structure. So that's all I was just checking on that. Thanks. Anything else from council? Thank you very much. I really appreciate the update, and I think the rest of council does, because we have heard that it's going and started, but we don't really see what it is. And I'll just echo or remind people to hear again what Councillor Mueller said, that it's an important process to get to our core values that'll allow us to carry forward even in the midst of great change. And we're in a process of change which is fundamentally different than the structural adjustments to the economy in the late 80s and early 90s, which were resource-based. Now we're in a boom. It's almost a mirror image, but the changes to Sechelt and the importance of keeping core values going are perhaps more important because they can just slip away in the midst of an economic boom. And then moving on, thank you very much for that. We have bylaws to consider this evening. Item 8.1. First, a motion to receive the report. Thank you, Councillor Wright and Councillor Seegers. All those in favor? And it's from the Chief Administrative Officer, and fairly straightforward, but I'd still ask you to speak to it for a moment.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's a fairly straightforward housekeeping bylaw. The community charter sets out requirements for local government when it comes to employees and officers of the municipality. We've been working with Perryville and Taylor on following up on the reorganization program that we're on, and this bylaw modernizes the officers' bylaw, updating positions, names, adding the current job descriptions we're all working under now, and also allows for the consolidating of bylaws under the corporate officer.
Thank you very much. Totally agree with the housekeeping because it was last done when I was cleaning house before. But I noticed there's nothing in your report or in the bylaw that talks about rescinding the bylaw from 2000. Do we not have to do that? It just supersedes? Or did I miss a line?
It is in the bylaw, Your Worship, the
Okay.
repeal.
Oh, okay, the very last one. Item 5, thank you. Hereby repealed. Any questions from councillors? I hope you all read the job descriptions and the descriptions carefully and closely. Councillor Mueller?
Well, it's not so much a question, but just more a comment. I think the community would be happy to see all these things front and center, the lists of key accountabilities to both council and community here. They're very clearly outlined, and there's a lot of stuff here that I really agree with, and I'm happy to see codified in official place, and I just want to quote a few things here. It's under community to ensure the effective utilization of district resources, financial, physical, and human, and to assist in the preparation of appropriate business cases and documents, enabling council members to fulfill their full functions. There's some great things here. To me, it's all aimed towards value, and that's something that I've really taken to heart in a council position. I'm happy to see the staff are officially on the same page. Thanks.
Any other comments? I'm happy to see the bullet under the CAOs that says ensures that an annual performance appraisal process is in place and that annual performance reviews are completed for all employees. I think keeping track of what people are doing is essential. So we can then look for a motion that officers and employees bylaw number 562-2017 be given 3 readings. Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz seconding. All those in favor? And with no objections, we'll move directly to doing those 3 readings, which are on page 31. First reading of Officers and Employees Bylaw number 562-2017, a bylaw to establish officer positions of the District of Sechelt and to establish the powers, duties, and responsibilities of such officers. First reading is moved by Councillor Seegers and Wright. All those in favor? Thank you very much. And second reading is moved by Councillor Mueller and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? No objections. And I see third reading is moved by Councillor Inkster and Councillor Wright. All those in favor of third reading? That's carried as well, and it will come back to us. It is well worth reading the job duties and outlines, and just to see how it's all structured, and it is quite encompassing and really gives a guideline of how business will be conducted. There's no new business, item 9, but there is business items 10.1, and we'll move to 10.1, request for a decision on the airport ground lease. First, a motion to receive the report. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Wright. All those in favor? That's carried. And we turn to the manager, the Director of Financial Services, on behalf of the Manager of Financial Services to speak to this report.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report is to seek Council's endorsement of a lease agreement with the Ministry of Forest, Lands and Natural Resources Operations. They're lease about 3,000 square feet of land up at the airport on behalf of the Wildfire Management Branch for the purposes of supporting the Coastal Wildfire Center operations. We did have a previous lease with them. It expired in 2013. At that time, through negotiations, we wanted to bring, or the district wanted to bring the lease rate up to a more equitable rate to current ground lease rates. The ministry at the time did not like that. It came forward to council with a request to keep the lease rates the same. Council rejected that at the time, and unfortunately, I guess it fell away then, and we've basically been going on a holdover on the previous lease since 2013. We've recently been in discussion with the ministry, and they've agreed to go to a commercial rate. So the lease rate would increase from $13 or 13 cents per square foot up to 20 cents per square foot, which is $2.15 per square meter. The lease is a 10-year lease starting December 1st, 2017, would expire November 30th, 2027. It has 2 additional 5-year terms, and the lease also provides for an increase in the rate based on the Consumer Price Index for the City of Vancouver as determined by Statistics Canada. seeking council's endorsement of this lease.
Yes, thank you very much. Any comments or clarifications? Councillor Mueller?
I'd be willing to move recommendation 2.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Inkster, actually. All those in favor? That's carried. And I would comment, this works out to $2.15 a square meter. And on the report, page 59 of our report, it looks like we're getting a very good rate compared to the comparables, even when the report from 2013, final report says that they think the other ones would get in our opinion, this would demand a premium on the rate when negotiated, i.e. those that are located. So we're actually in a place which isn't a premium, but we've ended up with a premium rate. So somebody did some good work. Thank you. Moving on to 10.2. Motion to receive the report. Thank you, Councillor Inkster and Councillor Seegers. All those in favor? And we'll turn to the Director of Corporate and Financial Services. Tell us about our budget process.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yeah, I understand this came up the last council meeting, so I prepared this report simply for information purposes to let council know what we've been working on and where we're going with the budget process coming up. So detail it through the report. It's primarily going to follow the same process as last year, where we'll prepare a draft financial plan to bring to the Finance, Culture and Economic Development Committee in December. That plan will provide our estimated cost to provide the same level of service that Council has endorsed in the 2017 financial plan. Following that, we'll seek input from the public, or sorry, actually before that, we'll bring forward another plan list to the Council, identifying service level changes that we would be recommending, changes to staff levels, any other additional items that may be not included in the financial plan, any capital projects that are not funded under the current financial plan structure that we have with the revenue sources we have in place now. So for all that for Council's consideration, we then seek public input in January or probably February, do some public information meetings, town hall perhaps. After that, once we've got all that input, it will then come back to Council, or actually the Finance Committee, for deliberation, where we'll be looking at each line item, each project, and deciding which ones move forward. One process we've done a little bit differently this year was to seek input from the community associations early. Last year we waited until January, and those projects kind of came in after the fact. So this year we've actually been meeting with them. We've met with every community association, found out what their priorities are, what their concerns are, and we're trying to incorporate them into the current financial plan. So trying to line up their priorities with what the district staff believe the priorities should be, so that base budget will include those in a priority basis with the additional list of those that aren't. One other thing we'll be doing in January is a little bit different, is coming to the committee with a recommendation of some early capital approval. It won't be for the entire capital list. It'll be those projects that we believe if we started earlier in the year, if there's long lead times for certain equipment that may be required, or to be able to go to tender for some of the construction projects, where often you get better rates if you go earlier in the year rather than waiting till May or June. And then often, as you'll see in our capital plan, even this year, we're going to RFPs now when some of the projects aren't starting. We're getting the work started, but they may carry over. So it'll allow us to get things moving a little more quickly. So that will be one change in January. We'll be bringing that list forward for Council or the Council's consideration. Otherwise, I say we're pretty much following the same process as last year. So that's where we're at.
I'll recognize Councillor Inkster and
through you to the CFO. I know that council hears and I've heard from a number of people. We always do throughout the year with some concerns they may have in their neighborhood and or work they'd like to see done in their neighborhood. I'm wondering if those people have then contacted their community associations to have that information delivered through that process, at least initially, and then perhaps they would then step forward with the same ideas at the community level when individuals step forward. Because I know I've directed a couple of people to finance staff if they have contributions, but I'm also wondering if that's a route they also took, which is a good one, because the community associations tend to package the ideas and present them to the finance staff and sometimes to council.
Your Worship, that was certainly the intention of asking the community associations to come. We had gave them prior notice of what we were meeting for, what we're looking for. We assumed they had gone out to seek input from their respective members. There are some other things that have come in just through emails, primarily to the operations side, of other suggestions, not necessarily through the community associations, that we've also considered and we will bring forward. And of course, through the public input, if anyone hasn't gone to their community associations, we'll still have the opportunity to let us know what they think.
Okay, and Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, for instance, the Davis Bay Community Association had been contacted. I happen to be the liaison for that particular association right now, and they brought it up at their last meeting, and that the district had been in touch with them about projects that they thought they might want to have included. So I'm glad to see that that's in front of the budget instead of at the tail end. On page 63, item 3.4, it says that you have a 5-year capital plan and that and then I see the word prioritization. Does that mean that you're going to prioritize the projects over the 5 years? Or does that mean that you're going to prioritize the project in each year for each of the 5 years?
Both, actually. They will be.
Thank you. That's even better.
No, the projects will be put into years based on funding sources available. The ones that we feel are need to be done sooner will be prioritized in 2018, 2019. Those that can be put off for a few years will be put off as well. But it will be by year within the years.
Well, I'm looking forward to that prioritization of the 2018 items. I really do appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that you took the capital budget and you're looking at having it approved much earlier, because you're right on the money, okay? As you know, we're going through roofing and a boiler replacement, okay, in September and October. And you better hope the weather is with us, okay? And so bringing those forward really does help and gives you a lot of lead time to get those things in place earlier. So thanks, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other comments from councillors? Councillor Mueller?
Yeah, it was just a further question about the discussion around item 3.5, and that's the meeting with district neighborhood associations. When this came up in last year's budget plan, it was because we were trying to decide between a bunch of competing issues in different neighborhoods, and for myself and council, I found that difficult. Obviously, we want to deliver something in every neighborhood, and I think that was part of the thrust of the discussion, was to try to make sure there was money earmarked for different requests by community associations. It wasn't a lot, but I'm just wondering if that is somewhat behind this.
Not really to have earmarked money for the community associations. Really, for me, the impetus for this came with council debating those community association projects after the initial budget was done. And my comment to staff was, if you knew you had an extra $150,000 to spend on roads, would you have picked this particular list to consider? And the answer was actually no. But when they came up with their base budget, they thought they had a fixed amount, and so they only budgeted what we could afford. And then this additional list came in, and those other projects were not included because they came in after the fact. So really the idea was to make sure that the community association priorities were considered at the same time as the district staff priorities are done. And in many cases they align. There's some cases where the community association has brought forward as their number one priority would have been the same one the district staff would have brought forward as the number one priority as well. So we're seeing a nice linking there, but it was really to make sure that you weren't considering one group of projects separately from another group of projects rather than looking at them all at once.
Okay, yeah, and the thrust of my question was, would there be money allotted for each neighborhood in each given year? Which was kind of was my point at the time. Not really a question of, are we going to get them before the budget process or after, but to make sure there's an equity amongst, in terms of dollars spent. That was kind of the thrust of my point there, and I'm just curious about that.
Honestly, that hadn't really been considered. We certainly could try to look at it that way and certainly identify perhaps what areas of the district are receiving funding and looking at it to see if it's an equitable distribution. But certainly I think from some of the capital projects, the needs may be greater in one area versus another, and to simply distribute them based on dollar values may not be in the best interest of the community as a whole.
Oh yeah, and I'm well aware of that for our core funding, the bulk of it. But what we were talking about was something in the ballpark of 150,000. So it was something to make sure that there's a community investment in each neighborhood in each given year. So that was the thrust, and I think council understood that at the time. I don't recall if a resolution was passed, but I'm batting 0 for 1 today. So
yeah. I think on that one, I recall that we were very concerned that we were considering one set of community needs in isolation of the other 4 or 5, and we didn't want to get caught in that again. And we did hear the interest in distributing projects across the community of Sechelt, the district, in an equitable way, but not necessarily year by year. And we can't do that unless we see them all together. And then we say, oh yeah, well last year we did this, so this year we should be looking at that. So there was certainly recognition of trying to have some responsiveness to individual neighborhoods, but it wasn't setting aside a pot that would be divided by 5 or by 3, because first we'll have to have the debate about how many. We used to be very, very clear. We had 7 neighborhoods. That's no longer the case. We either have 3 now or more than 9. So I'm not sure how we're doing that. So that's one of the issues that we have to deal with.
I think in time we can get there. To be honest, looking at the budget, with this commitment to increase the capital funding over a number of years, we'll get there. We don't have a lot of extra money to have this discretionary items to say, well, we've got $150,000 that we can do pet projects or specific things in each neighborhood. We're really just looking at highest priority and going down the list until the money runs out. And I don't think there's a lot of flexibility at this point. I think we're getting there, and I think in a few years we'll be in a better position to do that.
Okay, and I see Councillor Inkster.
I think you got
Councillor
me.
Lutz. I was here listening so carefully to the director, I didn't see anyone on my right. So Councillor Lutz.
I have a fear when you start talking about pots of money for each community. There was a time when that kind of budgeting was done in schools, and if you didn't spend it, you lost it. So some years you had more basketballs than you needed.
Okay, and Councillor Inkster.
Or strangely located schools. Anyway, I would hope that over a number of years that we, in a sense, have a thoughtful and equitable approach to the numbers of projects requested and needed in our community, but also we need to keep in mind that we may come across, and this happens quite often, we deal with it and we kind of get frustrated with it. Just the need is the major road work that may need to be done in a particular neighborhood in Sechelt that dividing up our money so equitably as maybe we could do would mean that we couldn't do a major road repair or an emergency that we would need to do. So we need to keep all that in mind when we make our decisions.
Thank you. And the only thing, we will have to have this discussion when you come to the Finance Committee with all of this, but if I read this all correctly, you're presenting a budget and staff is working on a budget based on service levels as opposed to revenue levels or tax levels, and you're not asking us what the tax or revenue level should be and then spending within it. You're asking what the service level should be and then meeting those needs. So, okay, we'll follow that process as we go forward. When in 3.6 you bring forward a list of service level changes, where will those changes, will those have emerged from the senior management team or from staff, or where will you be getting your suggestion of changes from?
From multiple sources. It could be staff-led, could be people from the community asking for more services, and we'll bring them forward. Some may be reductions in service levels if we feel we can change things. Others may be where we're not meeting the service level we feel we should, and we should increase a staffing level or something where we to maintain or enhance the service level. So primarily staff-driven, but we take any input we receive.
And as I hear that response, most of the service level changes brought forward in 3.6 will be for increases. Either needs aren't met or community interest in more service levels. So the reduction for service levels will all land at this table, and we'll be faced not with being generous, but be saying no. Once again, just we'll see how that.
It doesn't happen often, but occasionally in Kamloops we had a few service level reduction suggestions.
Otherwise, we have to make them. Okay. Let's move on to item 10.3, which is a report from Angela Letman on the Sunshine Coast Regional District referral. Motion to receive the report. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Shanks. All those in favor? It's carried, and we'll look to Ms. Letman to speak to this.
Briefly, Mayor and Council, this report is to review and respond to the Regional District's referral on their proposed official community plan amendment that will define and include affordable housing policies in their respective plans. And staff are recommending that we send a letter to the Regional District with our support and to approve subject to the following conditions. And they reflect some of the changes we'd like to see within the policies that are stated. One thing I did want to point out was that the review is to be completed and back to them by November 7th, next Tuesday. And that the District of Sechelt has had affordable housing policies in place since 2007. So we're happy that the Regional District has brought forward. And so to quickly go over the recommendations. One is to a requirement for public transit to be available before affordable housing is looked at. Another one is to have the BC Ministry of Environment as well, because the Vancouver Coastal Health Authority only looks at smaller septic sewage treatment plants, and if that's the intent, then it'll block larger projects. But we did want to try to put that in there, that that will be something that the regional board can consider. But just for your knowledge, that anything over a certain size has to have BC Ministry of Environment approval. Policy G, replace the word construction with smaller building to reflect that we're not talking about construction per se as a method, but rather a smaller building. D, that the SCRD be encouraged to define and map growth containment boundaries, such as the District of Sechelt's urban containment boundary, around their neighborhood centers, which is where they're proposing to have the affordable housing located. And that any increased density, whether it includes affordable housing or not, be located in close proximity to public transportation. So anything of increased density to have public transportation available. F, to consider including mandatory affordable housing contributions with any residential, multifamily, or mixed-use rezoning applications. G, consider a requirement that any affordable housing development applications be referred to the Sunshine Coast Affordable Housing Society for comment and possible involvement. H, that any increased housing density should be located in close, that was a repeat, I guess, close. Yep. Somewhat. The I, that the proposed SCRD amendments have no direct negative impacts on the District of Sechelt's land use policies. Number 3 motion is that due to the consistent annual growth of the region, that the Sunshine Coast Regional District, Town of Gibson's, District of Sechelt, and Sechelt Indian Government Band begin a regional growth strategy and appeal to the provincial government for funding to produce the plan in consultation with the community. That's because we really don't have any context in our own policies and bylaws to respond to an OCP amendment such as this, other than to say whether it affects us positively or negatively. And 4, that staff be directed to develop a council policy around the processing and administration of outside agency referrals to the District of Sechelt, because we have no policy, and previously staff, the directors have taken it upon themselves to respond directly when I feel that a lot of them should have gone to council for their response. So if you endorse number 4, then we will bring back a policy that states what kind of level and what type of referral will come to council and what ones could perhaps remain with staff. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you very much. There's lots to discuss here, but I'll first ask if there's any clarifications of the report and the referral process that would be directed to our municipal planner.
Thank you.
Councillor Seegers.
On page 67, G, they do talk about smaller buildings, and I know that there's been conversation at the regional board and with staff at the regional district with regards to small homes, tiny homes, those sorts of things. Is there anywhere in the information that was brought forward where they identify what they mean by smaller buildings?
There's no definition of it, but perhaps they have a minimum building size such as we have, and that's something we'll be considering in our new zoning bylaw. That smaller buildings, more suitable, they still need to be either modular homes or meet the building code, but that's the intention of an actual home, has to still meet the building code or the modular home codes and the mobile home codes of CSA. We can't have the tiny houses that are on trailers. They don't meet any kind of codes or safety issues.
But we don't know what this definition is at this point.
No.
Okay.
Just to follow up, but they could build a 200 square foot home to current construction standards, and then it would meet those codes.
Yes.
Yeah, so
And
it's not the size, it's the construction methods.
And many of the click homes locally made are smaller,
Might fit that.
around 800 square feet. So those, they would be, but they meet a modular CSA standard.
And I see Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, thanks. Just a cosmetic change, the third one that mentions the, just take out, I think, band at the end of that one, and Sechelt Indian Government Band. I think it's, I'm assuming they mean, the staff means SIGD, which is, I guess, how it's defined governmentally in terms of their lands, although I'm assuming in the next number of years.
Okay, when we get to recommendation 3,
Yeah.
we'll have to amend that.
Yeah, although I'm assuming the next number of years, even that probably will change how that's probably laid out, but probably will say the she shells eventually, I'm assuming, but that's how it is now. Yeah.
Band doesn't exist. Well, it does actually, but not, they have 3 hats there. Sechelt Indian Government District, Sechelt Nation, and for some purposes under the federal negotiations, Sechelt Indian Band. None of them are Sechelt Indian Government Band.
Okay.
So, any further clarifications or issues for discussion? I have lots on this that I'd like to say. So maybe that'll start the cat and the pigeons. Though it might be easier if we looked at the recommendations in reverse order and dealt with 3 and 4. First with 4, which is fairly straightforward, that staff be directed to develop a council policy around the processing and administration of outside agency referrals to the district of Sechelt. Is anyone to move that? Councillor Seegers, Councillor Wright. Any discussion of that? We understand what it would be about and why it's needed. And partly because this is probably the first referral that's come directly to us in under this term. So all those in favor, number 4? And if we look at number 3, which is the one that Councillor Inkster had suggested we amend, with the amendment that it reads the Sechelt Indian Government District, could we have somebody move that due to consistent annual growth of the region, that the SCRD Town of Gibson's District of Sechelt NSIGD begin a regional growth strategy plan and appeal to the provincial government for funding to produce the plan in consultation with the community. Or we could amend that so we drop the first clause that says due to consistent annual growth and say because it's long overdue, could we begin a regional growth strategy? But we won't. We'll keep it as worded. If I had somebody to move that, and second, Councillor Lutz and Councillor Mueller, and to speak to that. I'll start with Councillor Inkster, I think, and then Councillor Seegers.
So regional growth strategy was something that I believe was put forward by the regional district a number of years ago. And as far as I can recall, because I haven't heard it since, it didn't go very well. So we had some concerns with the approach being made at the regional level, basically because we in a sense, because we don't have the large rural areas other than pieces in Sechelt, we didn't want to be, in a sense, the concern was being dictated to on that particular approach. So if we're now suggesting that they come back and do that, we need to hope or consider what that would look like.
Obviously, it would be a process with much discussion, and all 4 governments on the coast that are involved would be involved. Nobody would be dictated to, and at the end of the day, the council doesn't have to adopt it, though I hope they would. I understand what happened last time and the impressions, and that it was resisted by the district of Sechelt and the planner of the day. The need for regional growth. So we'll keep that in mind as we go through. And Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I'd like to ask staff how they would see this playing out. As this is just put forward, would it be that we would take the lead in seeing if this would move forward? Do we see the regional district potentially taking the lead? How would this move forward?
Mayor and Council, it becomes a regional district initiative. It does have to come from them in terms of being a regional growth strategy, but the municipalities will need to have significant input into it. I believe the CAO, Mr. Yates, is very familiar with regional growth strategies, and it helps to define, in our future official community plan, it will help to define that plan as well.
I guess inside of the motion, would we want to indicate that we would like them to pursue looking at this? Because this is basically just saying, we should do this, but not really directing anybody to take the lead on it or requesting that somebody take the lead on it. I'm wondering if there could be some different wording in this that would direct,
It's sort of understood it has to be a regional district, so it wasn't worked into the motion, but it would make sense to either add a sentence that we understand the regional district would initiate this process, or would we do belong to the regional planning function. All the governments do. So that's where it would take place, and that's where the funding for it would take place. But it might be quite worthwhile to amend it to either add a clause or a completely new sentence that picks up on your point. If we can think of how to say that.
Maybe under the auspices of the regional district, or Sunshine Coast Regional District, or something like that.
Begin a regional growth strategy plan, comma, under the oh yes, we all would. We'd probably all write letters, but if we were all agreed to it, then they would.
And that the SCRD appeal to the provincial government for funding to produce the plan in consultation with the community.
Would that get the same point?
That's what you're saying.
And would
that may work.
Your need? Okay. So the suggestion is to amend after the word "and appeal" or and before appeal is to say and the SCRD and the Sunshine Coast Regional District appeal to the provincial government for funding to produce the plan in consultation with the community. And that says they're going to produce it.
Yes, thank you.
And that was moved by Councillor Seegers, seconded by Councillor Lutz. On the amendment alone, which puts the ball into the SCRD's court, all those in favor? That's carried. Okay. And now on the issue itself of the need for a regional growth strategy or the support for it or not. Councillor Mueller.
Well, I think it's, as the mayor said, it's long overdue. I think oftentimes the community looks at us producing another plan and they don't necessarily know some of the reasons why you would have that plan. And we've heard from our partners in the province and otherwise, when we want to get money for large-scale infrastructure projects related to growth, we need to have that regional growth strategy. And it provides this long-term rationale whenever we discuss with our partners about joining monies and grants and other things. that we really have something to talk about as to why it's needed, and that if all the partners are at the table, it's going to be something that will really benefit all wide parts of the coast. But I think in this particular issue, in terms of how we want to raise it, we've passed this particular one. Perhaps it needs to be raised by our liaison as well, and then perhaps council should consider sending a letter to that effect to all the local governments on the coast.
Yes, I imagine that.
Correcting staff, sorry, to send that.
Staff would have followed up on that in exactly that way. So it's not actually in the motion, but if we pass this, then a letter will be sent. And Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Perhaps staff could make a note that we have an intergovernmental meeting coming up shortly, and this could be something that could be on the agenda.
That's a very good point. And if the staff can make some notes for the deputy mayor, because the mayor won't be at the intergovernmental meeting, then we should actually say on November 1st, we pass this resolution, and that'll give us a chance to introduce it. And some of the arguments for why, I think, because it is important. That'll get it on that table, and staff will follow up with a letter to those governments if it passes now. And I'd recommend that it does. I think it's really important, and I'll speak to why when we get to the next one. All those in favor? That's carried. Now, if we can move to the main issue, which is the response to the referral. I had a short question. First, let's get it on the table with the deletion of H, because it's worded more clearly and better in E, because it has the clause on affordable housing. Somebody to move recommendation 2. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz. Now, for discussion, I would like to ask in the very first sort of preamble or opening, with a recommendation to approve, do we actually approve referrals, or do we accept referrals? Or I stumbled on the word approved, and I wondered what we were doing here. Pardon? See, the municipal planner is thinking, and also the corporate officer is thinking, so I can both think on this.
Because we haven't done it very often, I actually went to the regional district reports on ROCP amendments, and they always they seem to use the wording recommendation to approve.
Okay.
And that goes to their board to look at this.
And then I guess most important, we accept or approve their OCP amendments subject to the following conditions and comments. And those, it has to be clear that if these conditions are not followed through, we don't approve. And I think that often when people get referrals, they don't follow through that way. They get a set of referrals from the Ministry of Forests or from a local agency or community, and they say, oh yeah, they had 1 or 2 concerns, but they approve. And we want to be clear that we don't approve unless it comes through there. I had a question about I, which is now H, in terms of direct negative impacts on the District of Sechelt's land use policies. I understand it may not have any impacts, negative or positive, on our policies, but it will likely have significant impacts on patterns of growth and on development, and therefore on what we expect to come out of our land use policies. So I was concerned about how that was phrased, because it's not just the policy we're concerned about. However, my greatest concern is that I think this is an opportunity. One, we need the regional growth strategy, because when I read this through, this is an open invitation to developers on the lower mainland to come in and build suburban sprawl from Langdale to Middle Point. And in 15 to 20 years, we'll turn around and look. And if you want to know what a 700-meter lot subdivision is, or a small lot and small building subdivision is, drive into West Sechelt and ask yourself if that's what you want in Roberts Creek, in Half Moon Bay, in Elphinstone, because that's what they're putting in place here. And I don't think the community at large, the rural community, even understands what's being proposed. Everyone wants to help on affordable housing. I only put 1 check mark underneath their policies, which was check mark C, affordable housing shall be developed to integrate into rural communities and strengthen community identity and character. We can all agree with that. But then the policies around it that they put in will in fact not do that. They'll destroy rural character and will undermine the current identities. Just look at B and the last part of policy B. These areas will be prioritized for multifamily residential development, which may take the form of strata housing, multiplex townhouse, low-rise apartment, and so forth, mixed-use development that combines residential use with commercial, retail, service, and office uses. This is Cowrie Street. That is exactly the wording that we use for Cowrie Street. And this is now for the rural areas. And one of the reasons we need a regional growth strategy is because there was a time, 20 to 30 years ago, when there was a rough consensus on the Sunshine Coast of what that growth strategy would be, so we didn't need to write it down. Everyone agreed that Hillside was developed for heavy industry, and Sechelt, in fact, put a limit and a stop on all heavy industry being developed in our small industrial area until a council put in a batch plant for concrete, which was explicitly against the understanding that was there. People had agreed that Gibson's and Sechelt would take the dense residential growth, and in order to protect the values in Roberts Creek, Half Moon Bay, and other rural areas which make the Sunshine Coast so special. One of the reasons this is such a great place to live is people can live in genuinely rural areas in Half Moon Bay and Roberts Creek and drive to Sechelt to get their groceries and their doctor's appointments in 10 or 15 minutes. And the reverse, people who have to live in more dense and urban environments can access wilderness, Mount Elphinstone, mushrooms, fungal, whatever, within 10 minutes the other way. And this, when you read through these policies, you have to give your head a shake. You just have to give your head a shake. However, I have concerns over two issues, water and biosolids. They're encouraging considerably more dense use in areas which in fact don't have sewage plants. They have small plants or septics. And I think we need to put a condition and comment that in fact some arrangements are in place for all biosolids and septics. Right now, they're talking about expanding in significant ways. And what happens with all the biosolids on the Sunshine Coast? They come to the district of Sechelt. And somehow there's supposed to be a receptor there and a lagoon, and it's all going to work out fine. And there is absolutely no consideration here of the fact that we may have to build entirely new infrastructure to deal with the septics identified in this new density. And I'd be happy if I thought the density was going to lead to affordability, but nothing I see in here, whether it's pedestrian connections, parks, trails, biking paths, community sewage treatments, whether it's being close to transportation, detached or semi-detached single-family homes, have anything to do with affordability. I can show you $700,000 townhomes in Surrey that are not affordable and have meet all these requirements. So affordability has to do with social and market issues, not with construction or land use planning. We can build, and there's nothing in here that actually links it to affordability. And you can't tell me that supply will equal affordability. Increasing supply may or may not affect affordability. A housing crisis and a contraction may create affordability. There was lots of things affordable in 2008. Those same houses aren't affordable now. So it's just not thinking seriously about affordability. Secondly, I'm very worried about the water issue, and I'm going to suggest a amendment to 2 that says no additional density be considered until water, sufficient for stage 2 supply for all users be secured and available at all times during the year. Is that too much to expect? So that's one amendment. I think that we would approve this density, but no additional density be considered until water sufficient for stage 2 supply for all users be secured and available at all times during the year. And the second amendment was on biosolids, that arrangements must be in place for all biosolids and septage from increased density. This is what planning is about, and this is why infrastructure is so crucial to planning. And I read this and I saw, and I'll say this in 2 weeks when I'm at the board table, a rather naive view of how development works. And it isn't just land use policies. This would lead to suburban sprawl in places where I don't think even the people living there want it. So that's two amendments. I've heard one of them second. Are they both? Yep. Moved and seconded, moved by Councillor Lutz.
Two-part single amendment.
It should be in separate bullets. So I don't know what the lettering would be, but one additional one would be on the water, and the second one would be on arrangements in place for all biosolids and septages. So I and J. Did the staff get them? I'm sure the media did, so I'm... It was much simpler. Simply that arrangements are in place. So we approve, subject to the following conditions and comments, semicolon, that arrangements are in place for all biosolids and septages resulting from this increased density. This is when it gets to be fun. Is there any discussion of those two issues? Are they right up to lunch, or Councillor Mueller?
So I assume this is then discussion about the amendments.
Yes,
The amendments would be on the floor. Have they been moved and
Yes.
seconded?
They've been moved and seconded.
Yeah, I can't agree more with the amendments as they're presented. I think what we've heard here regarding this is some of the experience that we have in Sechelt that maybe they don't have in the rural areas about what it takes to really manage the growth of the urban environment right next to the natural environment, and what that means for the values of the Sunshine Coast and why people live here. So I think this is one of the reasons why we got the referral, is to provide this type of a point of view that hopefully that they'll be able to understand that this is something that they really need to look at, how growth is going to impact the rural communities. That's what they've always been stressing as SRD directors, is how do they maintain their rural feel. And I think these comments need to be received in that light.
Thank you. Other comments on the amendments? Councillor Inkster?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. We need to probably, as in many of these areas, advise. My only caveat on the water one would be that we do go to them quite often and ask them if they have enough water for things that we're doing all the time. Yeah.
And if they don't
Well,
have
they
the
do,
water,
but-
they shouldn't be approving it.
Well, yes, that's true. It's within their powers and responsibility, but we make decisions to approve subdivisions and or developments, and based on a number of criteria that would probably have that as a consideration, whether we have control over the resource or not. So if in fact our expectation is that, and within the spirit of the decision making, that we approve one and then they don't, what would then our reaction be? It's just something we should consider.
Yeah, I'm quite aware that we're calling for a standard that would apply to us,
Yes.
and councillors should think of that. Councillor Wright.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. In conversation with some of the regional directors, I brought up the very fact that you continue to approve and tell us that we have enough water for all of this increased development that we have, in particular in Sechelt. And the response to me, it was, well, you keep approving the subdivisions. And they want us to stop the subdivisions. They don't want to be in the position of stopping any growth because there is not enough water. So that seems to be the tack that they're taking. So I think people around this table they know my sentiments on the water, so I'll leave it at that. I'll support the motions, okay, as they stand, the amendments. Thank you.
Any further discussion required? Don't want anyone to be silent. Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, with regard to what Councillor Wright was just saying, obviously two wrongs do not make a right, and they keep accepting our development cost charges for those lots we're creating on behalf of their infrastructure.
We'll help them solve the water problem too, if given half a chance. If there's no further discussion, I'll just look to the council for the question. All those in favor of the amendments? And that's carried. None opposed. And we'll move to the main motion, which is that the District of Sechelt send a letter, et cetera, with a recommendation to approve, subject to the following conditions and comments. And they now run with the deletion of H, but with the addition of 2 new ones. Councillor Mueller is moving that. Councillor Wright seconds. Any discussion of this in its full form? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And we move to number 11, reports from councillors. And as we have done more recently, I'll start again on my left so that Councillor Inkster doesn't speak twice in a row. He can start the councillor reports and we'll come back to the regional district report.
Thanks. It's been a busy couple of weeks in terms of the meetings that we have been at outside of the regular schedule. Have been quite informative and involved, including the solid waste discussion, which many members of council had to put a day aside to be part of and to listen to the presentation and to contribute their thoughts. I hope that our council that was present was frank in those discussions. So that those who were there from the regional district who asked for the meeting could hear what we have to say going forward, much like I hope we're being frank on water so that they know what we would like to see going forward. That was a good meeting in terms of the exchange of ideas. Back to the District of Sechelt, the Trail Avenue discussion at the Seaside Center, I would have hoped, much like the retail one that I'll touch on in a sec, would have had a few more people to fill out the questionnaires on the proposed changes to Trail Avenue, because I know that Ms. Jordison was encouraging everyone who came in the door to fill out the questionnaire, because we do want to know what people think of the major construction that may occur to that road and its iterations. And I can tell you that one of the reasons why I'd like to see lots of input is as soon as we start to do the work and make changes to a major arterial road in Sechelt, we'll have a number of people wondering what we're doing and why we're doing it. I don't know if we have enough information, because staff did put a lot of good charts together and there was a large contingent of staff at that meeting to answer questions. And I just don't know if we got enough input, and I would encourage the community, I don't know how we'll do it because it could be something that's moving forward now, to put their input onto how they want that major artery to be developed as it feeds a part of our community that does still have some growth. So that road does need some work. I don't know if council noticed though too did council see the displays at Seaside Center, the original map of Sechelt as it was drawn up into the lots? It was drawn up with all these lots, and now we see this road Trail Avenue going up. So obviously they didn't envision the road needing to go up to the bluffs for development. So it's just funny how the original lots were set up. And I also wanted to mention the empty store retail discussion we had. Once again, I would have preferred to see more business people involved in that meeting with a number of council members and the chamber and the SDBA to discuss what we do moving forward to deal with some storefronts that we'd like to see filled with business and continue with a thriving downtown. Although it is good to see a game store open in downtown Sechelt. So if they structure their hours right to meet the fact that many of the people using it will be kids who may come after school, maybe it will bring some life to the downtown after 6 or 7 at night if they stay open late enough to meet the needs of the youth in our community that may want to go in there. And that's all I'm going to say from council reports. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I attended the same workshop and also the vacant commercial properties. That was the vacant commercial properties was a very interesting meeting. Not surprising, but it's going to be interesting to watch how that one unfolds in the near future. The last thing I'd like to mention was I attended a meeting for a provincial update with our MLA, Nicholas Simons, and lots of issues came up. Interestingly enough, 5-6 times, the question came up, what is the province going to do, or is there anything they can do about water and water restrictions on the Sunshine Coast? And lots of questions from individuals. What can I do to push this issue forward? So it's, although we're getting into November and probably the rainy season, I don't think the people have forgotten about that, and that's a good thing. So that will help us push that one forward. And that concludes the rest of the time. I didn't have that many meetings, so I had some time to myself. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much for that report. And Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. As been mentioned, the solid waste workshop, a number of us attended. It was a good workshop. I think we were all pretty frank in our conversations. I want to commend the SDBA for putting together that vacant commercial building tour. I guess they had about 30 people come with them, and they toured all of the various vacant properties downtown. And I have been approached by a few people who've indicated that now that they've seen the space, they are considering actually opening some businesses. So we may see some new businesses opening up. In the evening, there was a bit of a conversation with a number of Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Business Association, and a number of us around the table here. We're at the meeting looking at some of the options going forward and things that we could potentially assist with. Again, I attended the open house, the Trail Avenue construction project. I was looking for input from TRAC, so I believe that that's something that's going to be coming forward as well, because they were looking at how do we make it safe for the bicycle people on the road. And again, my daughter bikes a lot. She rides back and forth to work in Calgary. And so I actually called her and we were talking about some of the plans on the phone while I was there. And along with the mayor, I attended the library fundraiser on Saturday night. It was a good turnout. That's my report. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Mueller?
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure if any of council realize this, but just recently we had passed its 1 year now to the election. It's less than 1 year. So kind of with that in mind, my lovely partner, Georgia, who I believe is watching at home, created for me a scrapbook of all of the articles that I've been quoted in since being elected and also through the election. And we just spent the night looking through that. One thing became very apparent. I've been very kindly quoted by the media, so thank you to the media that are here. And I've also been very lucky to enjoy the support of the community and as well council and staff. It's been fantastic. But one of those things that was brought up for me through that was to kind of be reminded of some of the things that I've been working on, and in the year that lies ahead that I might continue to work on and hopefully bring to some resolution. So one of those things that came up for me, if anybody's been here listening to my reports, is that I've had a focus on forestry at a number of UBCMs and AVICCs. I usually attend forestry sessions, and they've been really good. And I did that because I'm so interested in the community forest. That's one of the big legacies of our community. It's also one of the big values that I see in the district structure. People get really emotional about forests because they are that vital. We all live in wood houses, most of us, and wood is used throughout our entire lives. Here we have a community forest with a variety of uses. And last year I was the council liaison to the AGM, and I accepted the community forest check for the Legacy Fund, and I got to see what was going on in that room there. And it became pretty clear to me that there were large parts of our community that were not represented there. There were members of the logging and forestry community in particular. There was the protests, and there were people that were actively engaged in contracting. That was the majority of who was in the room. And it just, to me, it looked to me like we really were due for community engagement around the community forest to bring out those other parts of the community that have a stake in it, and to really to bring that to a fruition. We've had some talks about that around the council table, but so far nothing official has come up. I've been told that in the next 2 weeks we'll have Mr. Bonderud back before the council, and that's something that I hope that we will be able to discuss with him in the future. It's coming up to the 10-year anniversary of that particular corporation, and also the start of a new 5-year cut plan for them. So that's one of the things that I'd really like to work on, and I'm hoping that Mr. Bonderud, we can provide that type of a forum for that discussion based on some of the key aspects of tenure, land base, cut planning, and community uses. So that's one of the things that popped up for me recently. I wanted to report that to council. I'm looking forward to the next 2 weeks. We can discuss it. On a lighter note, I just wanted to report to council that the first fall baseball league concluded just last weekend. They usually have a funny name for the team, so I'm not going to quote the team name. But anyways, that's, of course, to the lights we put up there. It's already being used. And I think that there's more plans for that to be used in the future. So I think that's great. More community involvement through sport is something that is the hallmarks of an active community. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And just to follow up on the community forest, it is my understanding that the chair will be giving his quarterly report next council meeting in the middle of November. And we are following up. We had a meeting in July with the corporate officer and the CAO. I was going to say the new CAO. At the time it felt relatively new. And one of the things we talked with the chair and the vice chair of the community forest was, and the registered forester, was specifically a community engagement plan. So we'll give them some notice that we'd like a little bit of update on that for November 15th. And I think staff will be able to follow up so they know that we're looking for an update. And Councillor Lutz.
Thank you. I too have attended the meetings around the solid waste. I observed the SCRD meeting where the water plan was discussed, and the vacant commercial property meeting with the SDBA. And there was some interesting discussion around uses of some of those vacant properties. I don't know what will come out of that, but hopefully something. I also had a meeting with some of the West Sechelt residents around a planned development in their neighborhood. And for me, it was a pretty quiet Halloween. My husband and I managed to eat the national average of 2 boxes full of candy bars before Halloween got here. Don't think my doctor would be too pleased with that. And I also attended the NDP luncheon with Nicholas Simons and his update on what's been happening. And it was an interesting afternoon. And as Councillor Wright said, water was one of the main issues brought forward, along with ferry schedules, as expected. But it's been a busy 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. And Councillor Shanks.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I too attended the information meeting on the Trail Avenue reconstruction options. There are only 3 options presented, but we were told that there are in fact others. So it'll be interesting to see what ultimately culminates in the reconstruction of that arterial road taking place. Heard on the news and was emailed by members of staff about the federal government introducing B 1464, Bill C-64, with respect to derelict and abandoned vessels. And also there's a news clip that Ladysmith has in fact applied to recover or deal with 9 boats, and they plan on applying on a regular basis to resolve their problem. But that was some good news. Interestingly enough, the comments about the water and people getting upset about the water seem to be running somewhat rampant in my circles of friends anyway. that they're getting tired of being told they have to turn their water off. And in fact, they're deliberately not turning it off, you know, it's their way of, I suppose, protesting the fact that every year we go to this stage 4. On a lighter note, you can attend the Ferry Advisory Committee meeting with BC Ferries at 8 o'clock this Friday morning down at the public marketplace in Gibsons. I expect the room will be packed. I'm buying breakfast, yes. No, but seriously, I would do that for anybody that attended. In this room. Sure. And, well, you haven't seen my stipend. Kidding. No, but seriously, it'll give us an opportunity to address some of the issues. This is only about the second meeting we've had with BC Ferries in the year. And the issues, once again, will be bringing up the time frame for doing improvements at Langdale Ferry Terminal, the ongoing issues about boarding of people with medical issues. And we have 2 or 3 pieces of correspondence with respect to that. And we're going to try and resolve that situation. But it's always an interesting meeting and somewhat enlightening for most of us that do attend. So if you haven't been before, see you at 8 o'clock on Friday morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that report and the invitation for breakfast for those in the room. I'm always, quite frankly, impressed when we go through the council reports, and whether it's BC Ferries or community forests or libraries or MLA luncheons or whatever, there's a lot of interest around this table that shows this council is out in the community following up on things and leading in all sorts of different ways. So kudos to all of you for the work you do. I would just mention 2 items. One of them was I did attend last weekend, a Friday and Saturday, BC Healthcare Coalition Conference in Vancouver. And it was an opportunity to connect with other people around the province who are advocating and primarily for seniors care, but for integrated and inclusive community care. There was a presentation at that conference by 2 of our own who were leading the Protect Public Health Care Coalition on the seniors housing, and their presentation was very well received, but also echoed by people from other places around the province in terms of the challenges of having community values and community input into community values respected and community input into healthcare decisions. So that was informative, and I attended in large part because I see, as much as I am so reluctant about federal and provincial issues, I see healthcare as emerging as one, next to water, one of the more important issues that our community and our council will have to deal with. And as mentioned by Councillor Seegers, the Sechelt Library had a fascinating fundraiser on last Saturday night, and I just want to say it was capped by an exceptional performance, literary and musical, by Simon Paradis and his wife Cara Stanley on the issues of love in a long-time relationship and recovery, and it was stunning and moving, and shows in one sense the artistic and creative forces that we have on the Sunshine Coast. They've just come back from a national tour on her last book where they work, and this material they presented was, okay, that tour is over and we've talked about the recovery. Let's now think through what that means for a relationship at this stage in our lives. It was really amazing and impressive. And we can move now to council correspondence. SCRD 11.2. I need my agenda in front of me. 11.2 SCRD Board Council Representative Report. Director Inkster.
Thank you.
And Mike.
I was so caught up in the thing you told about the fundraiser, because I've known Simon for years before and just after what happened, and to see the recovery. So I was kind of stuck there with you. But just a quick touch on something before I go into my report about something Councillor Mulder said about the forests and how important it is to people, and our responsibility with our tree planting program within our district and with community forest is think it's the forests are so important to people because it's that and other plant life is on our planet is our planet's lungs. So that's why forests are really important to many people. In terms of the regional district, once again, I just probably should talk to just remind me to talk to you afterwards on some water issues as you, I think as of now, step forward. And I wanted to talk to you about the conversation I had today. But I think the water solutions, I would just say, perhaps the water solutions would be what is permissible. So that should be a word we should consider. And also just, I won't touch any more on the solid waste one because we had a good discussion on that. And I'm glad to hear council members reacted to my comment about encouraging us at those meetings to be frank, because there's if we can solve the logistics, there's another water meeting coming up that should include council. So, so I hope many of us can attend and once again be frank about some of our concerns so that those that represent us at the regional district know what we're speaking to and what we're speaking on behalf of and for. I also wanted to mention as I close, it's been a busy couple of days because I took the kids, one's to getting too old, which is a little sad, but the second one sort of monitoring both of them in West Sechelt. And it was kind of interesting when the mayor referred to the density in West Sechelt, because it's kind of neat. You can let your kids loose up in there, and when you try to go up there to find them, there was literally, I don't know who in this room lives up there, but I'm nearby, and hundreds and hundreds of people in that area, because it's a really safe way for your kids to trick or treat. And the unfortunate part about the density, though, is my kids aren't that old, 7 and 9, and they couldn't, and this is probably, I don't know whether their dentist will be happy or sad about this, but they couldn't actually carry their bags at the end very easily. They had to be done by about 7:30. So from 5:30 to 7:30 they did that. They didn't go any further because there's fireworks. There's fireworks at just off the pier there, and the Sechelt put on the fireworks, and I don't know who went, but of course I have to. I don't think I have any choice. It was just well done. It went on for over, I think, probably 40 minutes. The firework demonstration was down there. I don't know if Councillor Lutz was there. She's nodding, but she probably saw it from her house. She could see it from her house. It's nice and warm, but it was a beautiful night for that, the fireworks. And so I'm glad to see them, the Sechelts, doing it again, because it was a great, once again, probably a couple thousand people were down there, and the night was beautiful. Firework, trying to get the kids to sleep after eating candy, which they do when you're not looking, was difficult, because then I had to be up at 6 o'clock this morning, actually before that 5:30, in order to get into Vancouver and make sure that they were in care so they could get to school, to go to a zero waste conference in Vancouver, and that's why I'm here now. The ferries are still like summer ferries, and I think that's because of the weather. They're full, and so that was delayed arriving. But I just wanted to pass on a couple of things to council that I gathered at this zero waste conference, because regional district's gathering information, because we talked about the landfill. In the world, there's of the food that's grown, 35 to 40% of food grown annually is wasted in the world. So that not only has some carbon issues, but it also means that we're not necessarily, and we could more properly deal with some of the issues in the world if that was distributed more properly. And a lot of the developed countries are the ones wasting the food. I think many of us know that. And that includes some local crops that we have, like apples, as we know from our own gardens, that they get wasted. A lot of the textiles in the world that are being thrown into the landfills, one of the problems with it is textiles is clothing, as we know, and it's driven more by fashion changes and the money to be made with that. So that's driving the huge production of textiles, and we know what's needed for that. The growing of cotton, etc., and water. So that's a problem. And I wanted to just mention, I hope I covered it all, one of the big issues in the world we know is microplastics. So not just plastic, but microplastics that we're hearing about in the ocean, but it's being finitely consumed by our animals. That's a huge issue. And they say that every year, 80 million tons of plastic is produced in the world. 80 million tons. And only 14% of that is recycled. And of that whole amount, only about 2% actually comes back in the beverage containers that originally, in a lot of cases, were originally came out as. So that's some of the problems that we're dealing with in the world, and that's some of the problems that we have to deal with when we move forward to look at solving some of our waste issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your report on Halloween, and hope you can follow up on the zero waste. And I hope those overloaded bags were a moment for education on what you need and what you want. Okay, moving to items for information. It's just council correspondence. Item 12.1, we have 4 items on the correspondence package. Most of them have actions that are already moving forward. Are there any of those we should pull out for specific attention? Most of them are for information. You'll see the one on cats and birds that will come back to us as a report. You'll see the one from BC Housing regarding the request. Item 3, that's the shelter. That's for information purposes. There are other initiatives going forward, but I think we'll just leave that for now because it's late. And if nobody wants to call the others out, then all those in favor of receipt, thank you. And I'll move then to adjournment. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Good evening, and it's now 8:45.